Hello, all, and thank you for listening. This is the Terms of Service podcast. I'm Johnny, and I'm joined by two of my friends in real life, very good friends. This is a podcast about gaming culture and aspects of toxicity in the gaming community. I'm going to pass it over to my friends to introduce themselves and let us know basically what they do, what kind of games they play, and how they navigate this community.
Hey, my name is Jeremiah Saint Team. I've been playing PC games all my life, basically, for probably over 10 years. And I focus more on playing competitive type games like League of Legends and Counter-Strike.
Hello, my name is Johnathan, and I am a competitive console gamer. I mostly play first-person shooter games, sports games, and also RPG games as well. I mainly play on the PlayStation 5, but when I first started playing games, I started playing on my PlayStation 2.
All right, so what is the first game you guys remember becoming engaged in? Basically, could be any console, any age, like just the earliest memory you guys have of actually becoming engaged in a game and a game actually piquing your interest in gaming.
For me personally, it first started when I was playing on my computer. My dad bought me Sonic 3 on PC, and that was actually like the first time I actually played a game. So I kind of have those deep roots in the PC gaming community because I pretty much grew up on it.
I started off with PlayStation 2 playing NBA 2K9, and I really got an interest in basketball after playing that game. I used to watch a lot of YouTube videos. The YouTube gaming community was very prominent back then, so I used to watch a lot of like shooting tutorial and dribbling tutorials, and I started to really like delve into the basketball community after that.
Okay. So, do you guys remember what it was about these games that got you so engaged into it? I mean, Johnathan just said you developed an interest in basketball off of repeat the game again.
NBA 2K9.
Okay, NBA 2K9, and this was on the PS3,
Oh, it was on the PS2.
PS2.
Yeah.
Okay. So you said you got engaged into that game because you started to develop an interest in basketball.
Yeah, that's correct.
So Jeremiah, you said Sonic 3.
Yeah.
So Sonic 3, what do you remember about Sonic 3 that basically let you know that okay, this is what I like. This is going to be one of my hobbies going forward, like gaming. What do you remember about that game?
Yeah, it was more about I was more of a fan of Sonic himself. So I feel like, that kind of bolstered my enjoyment of the game. And that is what kind of led me to, try to figure out like the different communities I can join, based on those type of games. So I started branching out and playing more games, which kind of piqued my interest even higher and higher.
So coming off of Sonic 3, where did that take you? Was that some sort of gateway into an online community per se?
Yeah, I would say that for sure. Because, shortly after my first competitive game was Team Fortress 2. And that game was more of like an escape for me, in high school. Since I never used to play the same games that other kids played, since I played on PC and most kids back then played on console, I felt it as more of just an escape for me to, be myself and actually communicate with people that I relate with.
Okay, so for you, Johnathan, do you feel like there was a community for you when you started playing 2K9? And do you feel as though this community that you found, if any, was a healthy one and one that you can actually develop substantial connections off of?
Yeah, definitely. When I first started playing 2K, it really piqued my interest, and I started to venture out and see what the community was like. And I started to come around a bunch of like different characters in the YouTube community, and I felt like it was something that I could definitely be a part of. It was very competitive back then, so at first it was kind of difficult for me to really like get into it. But yeah, it definitely was a great community, I feel.
Okay. So, Jeremiah, how would you describe the culture of? Well, firstly, let me ask you this: what was the first like online, like server based game that you played where you were actually interacting with people by voice or by text? Honestly, communications by text or voice comm.
Yeah, the first game I was playing, where they had voice comm was Counter-Strike Source, and a lot of my fond memories are mostly from that game, since a lot of the people that played it were kind of like refugees from playing console games, where they felt like they were outcasts because they didn't want to, they didn't enjoy playing games like Call of Duty, which was super popular at the time. So it kind of created like a nice, well knit community with all of us, and I've still have some friends today who I've played with on Counter Strike Source.
Okay, so you would say that your first experience online, like server based communities, was a positive one
Yes,
to
for the
start
most
off.
part, yes.
And how old were you around the time?
I was around 16, 17 years old.
Okay, so how about for you, Jonathan? Like this, your first like server based online game that you like got really engaged in.
I would definitely say it would be Call of Duty. The Call of Duty community was always an interesting community to me, but I wouldn't say that I had the best experience once I got online and started to use my headset and was able to communicate with everybody that was on the game. It was a very toxic environment. There was a lot of people that would say things to like get under your skin or do things on purpose to get a reaction out of people. So I would say definitely Call of Duty was my first online experience where I was able to really like communicate with others, and it was definitely rough.
You do you care to like share any of the, I guess, like the things that people would say that would make you feel like did it shock you or anything like that? Like what were kind of the sort of things that people were saying?
It was definitely shocking to me because when I started playing these games, it was around middle school. So, around that time, there's still a lot of things that we haven't experienced yet. Mainly the things that I would hear in these games were racist remarks, very sexist, and yeah, it was very violent. Yeah, the type of things that they would say were things that as a middle schooler, you never heard before. So it definitely was an eye-opening experience for me because I wasn't exposed to that type of behavior before.
All right, so Jerry, like, what's your first memory or your earliest memory of your first like, I guess, experience where you felt as though you had now entered a toxic space in gaming online?
Yeah, it was actually very early on, even before Counter Strike Source and TF2, since a lot of the people that play on PC are kind of like the social outcasts, so they tend to be more insensitive when it comes to communication, since they're not really used to speaking to people in public. So they tend to use a lot of insensitive language, like a lot of them say the N-word a lot just casually. It's like kind of weird. It's like you never really experienced that in middle school. So it was really an eye opener. But I've seen, I've learned that from an early age that you don't really want to surround yourself around these type of people, because you end up sharing their same views and ideas, and it can really cloud your judgment in the real world.
Shit. Okay. I mean, we definitely see a lot of the rhetoric and like the narrative around gaming affecting the youth nowadays. Like when it pertains to like current events and stuff like that, people often turn to games and point the finger at these shooter games and stuff like that when these tragic events happen in real life, and the games are put into question when it comes to topics of like mental health and what have you. So how do you feel about the games that you continue to play going forward, and how it pertains to like your mindset, or like your like certain emotions that you experienced, or if you had like raging episodes or stuff like that? Like, what was the first experience you had with that, and like, did you self-reflect after that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I remember it really fondly. It was my first time playing League of Legends, and if you know, a lot of people know that type of game. You know, League of Legends is a extremely competitive game. Like, you know, people really take rank seriously, and a lot of the times, you do get upset a lot of the time. You know, that's what any a competitive game, because you know you have that infatuation of winning. You want to win. You know, you don't want to lose, because when you lose, you feel it. And the first time I actually raged was during a game. Like, one of my teammates, you know, was really like holding the rest of the team back. And out of a fit of rage, I actually broke my space bar. Like, I just grabbed it, ripped it off, and threw it across the room. And during that time, you know, it's everybody's like, oh, you know, I would never break my keyboard. I would never throw my controller. But in those moments of like pure emotion, it kind of clouds your judgment. So I didn't know that me just throwing my spacebar across the room would cost me my whole keyboard. So it kind of, you know, opened my eyes to like, wow, you know, maybe I shouldn't really engage in this type of gameplay behavior.
Yeah, so you soon learn after that, as a consequence, that, well, yeah, there are consequences to you letting your emotions get the best of you in a game, or not recognizing that, okay, this is just a game. Like, I don't have to let this become physical, you know?
Yeah.
How about you, Jonathan? What was the first time you felt like, I guess like a game was getting a little, or you were getting a little too serious with a game?
I could definitely say playing Call of Duty. It's naturally a competitive game. There's a lot of skill-based matchmaking, which they rank you with people that are similar to your level. So ultimately, these games, they're considered like a team sport. So when you're playing well and your teammates are not playing well, it affects you negatively. And that negativity, it projects onto others as well. So there was points in times where I would be playing like certain games, and, you know, I would put on my headset and I would yell at my teammates. And it's just, when you playing so competitively, you're not having fun, you know?
Right.
The whole point of playing games is to enjoy yourself and have fun and play with people that, you know, you're playing with strangers, but you're also playing with friends as well. And even when you're playing with your friends, you can still get angry and, you know, throw a fit of rage at them as well. And it's just not a good environment to have.
Yeah, I know me personally, if I'm not having fun in a game, like as soon as I realize that it's either becoming too difficult or it's having an actual effect on my behavior or my emotions, even in the slightest in the moment, I might just turn the game off. I might just turn another game on. I don't know. But yeah, no, definitely. I feel like in society, especially now, where kids are almost encouraged to just stay inside and be so engaged into these devices, whether it be an iPad or PC or a game console, that can become almost like their space, their social space, because they're not really going outside. They're not really having much real life physical interaction with other people. So like when there's instances of raging and things like this, it could become a very they take this shit to heart. Like they really they go hard, and it kind of just like I said, this is their life. This is what they do all day. And that's it. Like when they go to school, because they have to go to school at some point, those behaviors are going to show up somehow. And it could be very detrimental to society as a whole if there's a whole bunch of kids that's going around that don't really know how to interact socially, and they're just stuck on these games. Right. So how do you guys feel about like transitioning from, like, put yourself in the shoes of a kid that doesn't really interact that much with other people outside of gaming. How do you feel you would navigate that as like seeing? I know you guys have also been involved in schools and stuff like that. How would you go about speaking to a kid that doesn't really interact that much socially, but maybe getting picked on or something like that in school, and he might have an adverse reaction to that?
Yeah, like, you know, I can speak from experience being that exact kid, that really didn't really speak to anyone because I didn't really relate based on the games I played. And in high school, your basically social status, your social status in high school was basically based off what games you play. So if you didn't play the hot new game that came out, in the next month, you weren't like, you weren't popular at all. So, the one thing I just told myself was that, just be yourself, do what you enjoy. Because
Right.
I actually, tried to play the same games that they, played. And I actually just pretended that I liked them, even though I didn't, just to fit in. And it just wasn't a good mindset to have because I was just always so depressed all the time because I knew that I couldn't really relate to these people that I'm trying to relate to, and I would always just go back to the people on my game as an outlet just to, get those frustrations out. And a lot of people take out these frustrations differently,
Right.
which is shown in toxicity and in sensitivity. But a lot of people, like myself, just want that social interaction. We're not seeking attention or, just bothering people, trolling, like, the term trolling, trolling people. No, it's just that, we're looking for an outlet, basically.
What about you, Jonathan? Do you feel like there is a healthier way or some way to speak to certain kids that might be experiencing this, to go about navigating a physical social space, transitioning from solely being involved and engaged in like online gaming culture?
Oh yeah, so definitely what I could say is that when it comes to the gaming culture, there's a lot of influence. Whether it's coming from playing online or the YouTube community, or there's also like Discord, and there's
Right.
influence everywhere. And when it comes to children and teenagers, they're so easily influenced and they're like sponges.
Yeah.
So whatever behaviors they see in these online communities, most likely they're going to follow it because they feel like, it's trendy. So everyone's doing it. I want to fit in. I want to be like these other kids, and I don't want to be the outcast. I don't want to be the one left out. So I feel like that's another problem in itself, the YouTube community, how they promote the toxicity as well. There's a lot of videos that these kids watch and they try to reenact it, and I feel like that translate into real life as well. Because a lot of those behaviors, they might exhibit it at the schools that they go to, or they might go to like social spaces and exhibit that type of behavior. So I feel like definitely influence has a big part to play in how the transition from online gaming goes into real life.
All right, so let's talk more about like the new age of gaming with specifically streamers. For example, like Twitch streamers. There's a lot of figures coming up that are getting famous off, their personalities online, and they play games, and they build communities of their own, and it's like subcultures under subcultures, which has that kind of dynamic has a history of developing into certain things that could either be problematic or very influential in certain demographics. So what do you guys think about aspects of that, like streaming culture and the communities that these new internet personalities build?
All right, so what I could definitely say is there is a lot of streaming platforms that are present currently. You have like Twitch, YouTube, And with these platforms, they give the streamers, the freedom to build their own community. Whether the community turns out to be positive or negative is really hard, because dang, I don't
It's
know.
often really based on the streamer, because you could say that the streamer's community is just a mirror of the streamer themselves, because there's a lot of examples of streamers who have such toxic communities that do things like swatting, which is like calling literal SWAT team to someone's house, like making a false call. And it's really dangerous situations. A lot of people have died from swatting.
Yeah.
And this is something that's like, this is like a normal thing now because it happens so often, which is like very sad. And there's a lot of people that say, oh, you can't really, like, no one told them to swat anybody, and the streamer hasn't told anybody, but you can just see, like, how the streamer behaves, how they present themselves. They can really incite this type of behavior if they're a toxic person. If their main source, like their main demographic, is just impressing people through toxicity and insensitivity, you'll get people you have viewers who are toxic and insensitive.
Yeah. I could definitely agree. There's definitely some streamers that they directly promote the toxicity as well. How they speak to other gamers when they're streaming plays a big part into that as well. And I feel like a lot of them do that because they know that in the YouTube community and when they post videos that it's good content.
Yeah.
Toxicity is good content nowadays. So I feel like that's why a lot of streamers are resorting to that, because they know that people are going to want to see these type of videos.
Oh, you said toxicity is good content. I remember there was this Twitch streamer who's becoming like very famous now, Phantom.
Yeah.
He was playing Grand Theft Auto roleplay online on the PC, and by that point, people knew that he was pretty big, pretty famous online on the internet, and somebody came to the same area in the server where he was at on the map, and just drove a car by and just rolled. I mean, just said the N-word basically.
Yeah.
And they did that because they knew that he would probably have to end the stream, which was what he ended up doing, because Twitch has a very strict policy against slurs and that's just use of language and stuff like that, and imagery. So that kind of stuff also comes into play when it comes to toxic behaviors online and gaming.
And I'm not really sure. I never really watched Phantom, but you wouldn't say he's a toxic streamer.
No, not at all.
No, not at all. Because there are many different aspects. You can't always say that. Oh, someone's whoever did that thing with the N-word would be, oh, that's like a viewer. So no, it's just random person.
A random person that was
random
on the same
people.
server as him.
Yeah.
It's just the culture as a whole. It's like it's very hard, especially for people of color, to stream, since there are people like that who do that all the time. It's like, I can't play on a public server now because now I have the fear of someone just saying the N-word, trying to get me banned off my stream,
Yeah. And even with there's a lot of precautions that streamers take as well. They have moderators in their chat that look for certain keywords to try and filter out their chat, because there are viewers that try to promote bad language and try to promote like these type of activities as well.
Yeah, and I think they just do these kinds of things just to get a reaction. They only say specific toxic things, and like they use specific language which they know is gonna get a reaction, because these are things that people are more sensitive to in our day. There's more of a discourse around like use of language and slurs and just like cultural awareness. So they know that they're gonna get a reaction out of people online when they use certain words and say certain things just to troll, basically. So like on an industry aspect, when in terms of like the developers of these games and stuff like that, what do you think their role is in these games and the communities that spur from these games?
Yeah, so these developers, their sole goal is to keep the game engaging, not as much enjoyable. And I say this because a lot of the games that are out now, which are the most popular, are battle royale games, which are the most competitive games out there. And those games aren't developed solely on enjoyment. They're only based on, how many people we can get, how many players we can get. They only care about numbers.
Competitiveness.
Yeah. It's like we want to see high numbers. We don't care about if the game is good or not. We want to see if people are playing. And a lot of those games really put a strain on casual players. There's a lot of competitive players, but there are an overwhelming amount of casual players. And unfortunately, casual players are basically forced to play these types of games since they're the only games that are often pumped out the door every single year. And if you're not playing it, you're basically not in the zone, so to speak.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. Most of these games that are being put out there are competitive games. A lot of companies are rivals with each other. So what they do is they don't really have diversity when it comes to the type of games that they develop. And a lot of times there are people that are in these communities of these games that express real issues that are pertaining to the game, and the developers don't really take the time to interact with the people that play the game. Mostly they just put out the game just to have some content so they can have some revenue. They don't really take the time to listen to the people that play the game.
Yeah, and you could say that it kind of defeats the purpose of a video game, honestly,
Right.
because video games were initially created as a tool for enjoyment. You want to come home from work and, you may have probably had a hard day. You want to sit down, get your controller and start playing a game. But 90% of the games that are out right now are games that you have to be hyper-focused. You have to be, so hyperactive in trying to win, where I just want to sit down and play. I don't want to sit down and be top 100 in the world. You understand? So, as a PC player, PC games tend to be more, difficult since there's a higher skill ceiling based on, controls alone. Mm-hmm. And this is like a huge issue in the PC gaming community. But, over the years, it's been changing a lot since, more games have been made to focus on the casual crowd, especially with fighting games. Fighting games happens to be one of my favorite, genres. And I kind of seeked fighting games as an outlet from those competitive shooters and, other games, since you can sit down casually and play. You don't have to play online. You can play against bots, computer generated. And yeah, fighting games do have the problem with players that play at a high skill scene that, it's like this guy's better than me, it kind of gives you the fixed mindset. It's like, oh, I can't improve, You shouldn't be developing a fixed mindset on a video game, Because it's like, oh, you want to improve, but there's not much to get off of that, Yeah, you improve in a game and you get top 500. Now what? If you're not going pro, there's nothing to gain from it. So why even try, really? So that's kind of like, a really personal topic on my end.
So you touched on developers making these games way more realistic and requiring an extreme amount of focus.
Like 100% of your attention, yeah.
100%. Okay, so would you say that? Well, I think you are saying that that's being done to a detriment in terms of like the community. Do you think that that has an effect on real life behaviors then outside of that community?
Oh yeah, definitely. And it goes back to what I said about, fixed mindset, because me personally, I've grown with a fixed mindset in high school, and I feel like I've basically developed that through playing games like League of Legends and Counter-Strike, where I really wasn't improving at all. Like, I would just stay at the same rank. I'd lose every game, and it's like, man, like, what is even the point? And that kind of followed me into my high school, basically education, where I felt like, what is the point of all this? There's always going to be someone better than me, just like in games, A lot of people say, oh, there's going to be some guy that's going to be better than me, that's going to take my position. Why should I even go for it? And that kind of mindset follows over into games as well. It's like, oh, this guy at top 500 rank is better than me. Why should I even go for that rank in the first place? So you can see how that kind of overlaps with real life and in the games itself.
It's almost like a robotic kind of thing, like, and it plays into your real life situations. Like, you might see competition and everything, or you might feel like you have to hyper analyze, I guess.
Yeah.
So what would you say? Have you had any experience with that, Johnathan? About like, I guess having your tendencies, your mental tendencies on gaming seeping into your real life behaviors?
Oh yeah, definitely I could say that. Gaming has a way of meshing with your self-esteem. If you don't play well on the game, it might ruin your whole day, and now you're not motivated to do certain things. So I feel like it definitely plays a part with self-esteem. I would play games with my friends and we didn't play too well, and then I go into school the next day and everybody's like dreary, So I feel like it definitely plays a huge part in that.
All right, so I want to touch on the topic of misogyny and toxic aspects of the gaming community. We also touched on like topics like self-esteem and like lack of social interaction. So how do you guys think that plays into how do you think these toxic aspects manifest in real life when it comes to girls and women, and I guess guys' interaction with women in and out of the gaming community?
Yeah, like this has always been an issue in the gaming community from like the very beginning, from what I remember. And, me playing on PC, there's like a wide range of, different people on there. And 90% of the time when there's like a girl on the server, the first thing they would say is like, oh my God, it's a girl. They either say like, drooling over her, or they'll say some like the most obscene thing known to man. And it's truly like, it's crazy to see how these people act around, the opposite sex. And you could say, as you said, it stems from, antisocial behavior, not being like, not interacting with people of the same opposite sex. And, it's more of like gatekeeping in a way, because, ever since we were kids, I remember the times where it's like, oh, like you see boys playing a game or something like that. If a girl comes up, it's like, oh no, like, it's the boys' time. We're playing the game. And, that kind of behavior as kids, it kind of, pushes on to like gaming. And gaming has always felt like a boys thing. It was a boys thing to play video games, It's like, oh, girls did whatever girls did back then. And boys were just playing video games or playing like, these games or whatever. And once, women started to have interest in these type of games, it's a lot of the time they, get pushed back because of this negative stigma around it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. When it comes to the gaming community, women and girls always had a hard time. Like they were always shunned by guys when they had an interest in video games. And I feel like a lot of guys would question how genuine the women and the girls were in their interest for games. And I feel like that always gave the girls a hard time, especially when they would try to stream games or when they would join like the chats where you can communicate with other people, how they would say all these obscene things. And I feel like this is something that's always been there, and it will always be there, because there will always be people that feel like women shouldn't play these games.
Yeah. And one thing to note, speaking of Call of Duty, I don't know if you heard of the girl called Nadia. You know, she was outed as a cheater in the Call of Duty community, but the way that it was like she was treated was like horrible, you know? Like to say if a guy cheated and like, you know, in the game, it was like, oh, you know, it's not really that big of a deal. But since even before she was outed as a cheater, she was like, you know, ridiculed and badgered just for the fact that she was a woman playing a video game. And, you know, it was kind of ironic since how good she was at the game itself, because she wasn't bad at Call of Duty at all. You know, she got invited to the, you know, Call of Duty Invitational and was actually playing in the esport scene. And I feel like there was like a kind of jealousy among like other content creators, and they kind of fueled the hate towards her. And, you know, it didn't really help her situation since, like, you know, she is a girl and she happens to be attractive. So a lot of the times they make up like, you know, false things like, oh, you know, she must have did something to be in that position.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's all those misogynistic type, you know, insensitive things to say. And yeah, this is like normalized in the gaming community, and it's very sad to say, you know.
Yeah, stuff like that doesn't really surprise you, and that's kind of a sad thing to think about, because even in other professions and other like fields of work, like for example, like female musicians, female rappers, they get the same kind of like treatment, like, oh, she must have done such and such with whoever to get to where she's at, or she's only there because of how she looks, her body, whatever the fuck. Stuff like that. So, staying on the topic of misogyny, Jeremiah, you're a PC gamer, and you play more niche games with like games that have more niche communities online. And Johnathan, you play Call of Duty, which is a pretty popular game that has a more diverse community online. So, what are some of the aspects of misogyny that you guys see prevalent in these games, and what do you think? How do you think that intersects? I guess of the compare and contrast.
Yeah, so for me, I'm not sure if you heard of the popular game Valorant, which is on PC. It's surprising because I read an article that a large fraction of the player base of Valorant is female, which is very surprising when it comes to, you know, a modern game developed in the recent years, probably like in the last 2 years it was created. And I remember from watching a lot of the different, you know, highlight channels and things like that and streams that the misogyny on those type of games are rampant, you know, even though the player base of that game is predominantly female. There tends to be a larger amount of misogyny in those type of games where there's a large female population. And yeah, like when it comes to PC players are more on the edgy side, where they tend to be, you know, more insensitive. And, you know, it kind of pushes females away from playing those type of games. But, you know, a lot of them, it doesn't faze them that much, but it's still a huge issue, you know, within the gaming community. And I feel like that should really change.
I feel like as a console gamer, there is a lot of sports teams, and you don't see any females on these sports teams. Most of these teams are male oriented. And I feel like that really shows like how misogynistic, you know, the online community can be, because there are plenty of female gamers that are very skilled, you know, but they are not exposed in that light. They don't get that type of exposure as these male streamers get.
And I've always felt like that's kind of a strange idea there, that there has to be some type of discrepancy or some type of like special scrutiny on female competitors, whether it be in sports or in gaming. But now that we mentioned sports, before we had mentioned that there was a 2K cover that had a WNBA player on it, and that cover was being promoted on the internet, but it never ended up being released. And it would have appeared that it was never released because of pushback from the 2K community, a male dominated obviously community.
Yeah.
And there was pushback, and the cover ended up not being used.
Okay.
So how do you feel about that, Johnathan? Like, do you think well, obviously they would make the argument that it's about the marketability of it, and I guess like the overall popularity, like I was saying, community pushback and everything. So what's your opinion on that?
I definitely feel like when it comes to inclusivity, like including, women players, like they don't really take that into consideration as much as they should. And that also plays into the popularity of, female gamers and the league itself.
Yeah.
When it comes to the WNBA. The NBA has always been a male-led sport, so when it comes to the video games, you don't see the WNBA in it. And they made an attempt to promote the WNBA in their game, but they end up putting it in the back seat because they realized that when it came to promoting it, that it wasn't really bringing as much audience as they expected it to.
But it's in the game, isn't it? Like
it's
there. The league,
yeah,
the league
it's
is integrated.
the league is definitely in the game, yeah, for sure. But they were promoting it really heavy. Like they made the cover and everything, and they said, we're gonna have our WNBA edition, and they ended up canceling it. So it just
Canceling the cover?
Yeah, they end up canceling the edition altogether.
So the final rollout of the game, like when it came to the final days of like pre-release,
Yeah.
there was no sign of like promotion on that.
Yeah, so they canceled the promotion and everything, and they end up not even having a WNBA edition. They were just like, you know what, we're just going to have the teams integrated in the game, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of plays a huge part in the gaming communities. Like, it's like an allergy to change, like when there's change, usually the gaming community doesn't really like it because they feel like, oh, everything is good the way it is. Why should we change and start implementing other stuff? But they tend to not realize, since they're living in a bubble, obviously, since a lot of them have not really gotten to terms with society, is that society changes every single day, every year, there's not going to be certain things. Everything's going to change. We're getting less and less insensitive. And these type of people just want to keep that insensitivity alive, being in their inner circles where it's so rampant. And like with WNBA teams, it's, the pushback is just like unwarranted, it's just like, oh, obviously it's just like, oh, yeah, we don't want to see that. That's not what we want. We want to see the big superstars, like LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. But, it's just the WNBA in general. It's just not very popular. And there's no efforts to make it a popular franchise, among people.
And that discourages young girls or even teenagers and women from engaging in that community, in the 2K community, because they don't see themselves in the game. They don't see, they can certainly look up to male figures, why not? But they're not going to, if they aspire to be a basketball player, they're not going to play in the NBA. They're going to play in the WNBA. So they don't really see, female stars that they can aspire to be like, or just, play with or emulate in a game space on these games because of that. Until now, the league, the WNBA is in the game now in 2K, but it took a while for that to happen.
And also what I would like to add to that is that there was genuine concerns when it came to there was a lot of female gamers that was saying, with the 2K, they have this my player aspect where you're able to create your own player.
Right.
And there was a lot of people that were saying, we would like to see you be able to create a female my player. Mm-hmm. And they would, express their concerns during like the events that the 2K would have, and 2K would never acknowledge it.
Yeah, I kind of noticed that, when it comes to, I've seen a lot of 2K videos, and I'm just wondering like, why aren't there any female players in the park? You know, like in the park I always see is just guys, and that it's kind of really discouraging. You know, when she like, you know, maybe I'm pretty sure there's a lot of girls out there who love to play, you know, sports games like 2K, and it's just sad to see that, you know, they can't have that relative, you know, experience with the players, since like, you know, 100% of the players are male, you know. And yeah, there's an inclusion of WNBA players in the game which you can play, but when it comes to the park, which is the most popular feature, there's no women there. So you can see that, you know, where 2K's basically position lines at. You know, they're only pertaining to the popular majority, instead of like, you know, boosting that minority support to a higher level, equally between both player bases.
All right, so touching back on just community-based issues and like the toxicity within the community, it's obviously a societal thing. The game developers or the game moderators and stuff like that, they can, you know, implement terms of service. Haha, get it? they could implement whatever they want in these games, but at the end of the day, if it's a societal issue and if the gamers themselves still engage in these toxic behaviors and there's lack of inclusivity and just intolerance towards other people, these problems are going to persist.
Yeah, so, you know, I can speak for the entire PC gaming community, and I could say there's pretty much no hope for us at all. And, you know, I say this with experience, you know, ever since the beginning when I started, it's always been toxic. And as the years just keep going on and on and on, it's just becoming more and more toxic because, you know, we've started to become more inclusive and, you know, bringing a lot of marginalized communities together, you know, to kind of build equality. And, you know, that's kind of like public enemy number one for PC gamers a lot of the time, because, you know, they're all about that edgy culture, like, you know, anti-change, everything wants to be the same. And, you know, it's mostly on the individual level for them to grow as people themselves, because, you know, you can moderate anything you want. You can try to clean your community. There's always going to be bad apples everywhere. You know, you can't shun everybody out. Like every time, you know, you convert one person, there's going to be another person who's just going to come and take their place. And, you know, like, I'm sure Johnathan could speak for the console community because, yeah, I'm not sure about them.
Yeah, definitely when it comes to the console community, a lot of the issues that are happening are very internal with the social circles that play under these games. There is a disconnect, a very big disconnect, and a lot of the behaviors that happen are promoted within these communities. It's not really the game itself, it's the people that play the game and the influence that they have on each other. Because the power influence is very strong when it comes to the gaming culture itself.
So in terms of, I guess, like we said, we all agree that it's a societal thing and that, yeah, it's a social problem. It's the gamers themselves. It's not the game. So is there some type of resolution? Like, is there a world where these gamers could become a little less antisocial in the real world and actually have interactions with different people and diverse demographics out there and bring a more positive energy and a more positive behavior into the gaming community? Do you guys have any hope for that at all?
Honestly, like we will always hope for it, but it really starts individually. Being a better person in general, outside of the game, and then it will translate inside the game. But these issues, they've always been prominent, and there have been many attempts to try and clean out these games and have more censorship. But a lot of these games are really laxed when it comes to, filtering out the bad apples of the groups.
Yeah, as Jonathan said, censorship is like the big topic nowadays, and you can censor almost everything you want, but it's not gonna keep the bad people away, essentially. And hope is not something I feel like I can believe in at this time. When it comes to PC, because as I said like a lot of times before, that a lot of the people that participate in this toxic behavior see PC gaming as an outlet. So being like basically the martyr and basically the home of all toxicity, it's very hard to address this issue. It would have to be more internally in the communities themselves. It's up to the people who run these communities to make it a better place for everybody to be more included and inclusive.
One thing I could also add on to that is that we honestly feel like those streamers and those gamers with a lot of influence, it would definitely make a difference for them to promote, better behavior in these games, because the younger generations that are playing these games, they look up to these older streamers that they consider OGs, that have been playing these games for a very long time. And if they see these type of behaviors from them, then it's just going to trickle down and it's going to be a never-ending cycle.
All right. At some point, hopefully, there's progress. Hopefully, there's a trend in a more positive direction. Any final thoughts? Any final comments? Anything?
Yeah, like I feel like I kind of reflected on a lot of things that I was really holding deep inside in this podcast, because a lot of these things that not a lot of people really want to hear about. It's like, oh, these are like little tiny issues, because when it comes to game, but a lot of people like myself are very passionate about gaming, so it's really it hits a hard place inside.
Yeah, I definitely agree. These topics that we discuss in this podcast are topics that a lot of people avoid speaking on because it can be very sensitive. And it's great to address these issues and see if there can be any resolution, or like what steps can be taken to make the community a better place, for new gamers and for gamers that have been established in this community for a very long time. So there is a lot of points that you can take, and it's a learning lesson. It's something that's always going to continue to adapt. It's going to be there, So it's good to see different perspectives, seeing the console perspective and the PC perspective, and yeah.
I mean, yeah, bottom line is that this is supposed to be, anywhere, it's supposed to be a safe space for people. Like we said, this is an outlet for people, but it has to be a healthy outlet. It shouldn't be something that can promote toxicity and racism and misogyny and all these other things that we already battle with in the real world. Right. It shouldn't have to. There shouldn't be room for those things to perpetuate on these online communities. Everybody should be able to feel included and seen and safe in any community at all. So hopefully at some point, like I said, there's progress. Hopefully anybody that decides to purchase or engage in gaming, whether it be PC or console, or decides to start streaming and stuff like that, which is a budding industry now, where a lot of people are making money and stuff. Hopefully there's just a trend in the right direction, and there's less of that toxic behavior to speak on. So that's all. I want to thank everybody that listens